Hello, crafters, and welcome to another Sketch Starters with Nicole. I'm so glad that we get to spend some craft time together today, and you're going to just love this brand new sketch. I've done a little bit of a perspective flip on the two different versions, and I hope that you enjoy the ideas. For my first card, we're going black and gold, and we're going to start off with some stamping and embossing. So I'm going to take the sentiment, and I'm also going to take the flowers and stamp those out in some embossing ink and then emboss them in gold. When you're using black, it's really important that you use an anti-static powder because embossing powders really like to stick to black and they really show up. So I've put lots of anti-static powder down and I'm putting on my sentiment now, and I'll go in and do 3 of the flowers from the stamp set. And these coordinate perfectly with the 3D embossing folder. So I really love that even though they didn't come out at the same time, you can really use them together to create an even more cohesive look with your projects. So I have 2 flowers and a leaf ready for embossing, and those are going to go right into my gold embossing powder. And I use this in a larger container because I'm always using my staple embossing powders like gold, clear, white, black, silver. So those all I have in larger containers, and it just makes it super easy to get the embossing powder on those. So I'll heat those up, and when we come back, we'll do some watercoloring. Now that I've got these all embossed and I've got them die cut out, I'm going to add just a little bit of detail with the metallic watercolors. And I'm using sterling silver just to add a little bit of detail to the flowers. It doesn't need a lot, but it's just a little bit to add some interest, so it's not just such a plain black and gold card. So I've got my first flower done, and I'm just going to add a little bit more to my second flower. I think I'm going to leave the leaf alone because it's going to be tucked behind the flower and there needs to be a little bit of contrast there. If I wanted to, I could add a little bit of green, but I'm really trying to go for a monochromatic look, so I just decided that staying away from the leaf is probably a good idea. So now I'm going to work on the last 2 elements that we need to put this card together. The first is a rounded rectangle frame, and I'm going to use the largest rounded rectangle from the die set and do that on another piece of jet black cardstock. So I'm trying to get that framed in there perfectly in the center. And once I have the top and bottom aligned, I can shimmy it just a little bit left and right to make sure that I have it right in the center. So now that I've got that ready to go, I'll set that aside. And then I'm also going to do my embossing with the beautiful Bergenia 3D embossing folder. Now this folder is a little thicker than regular embossing folders, so make sure that you check your sandwich for your embossing machine. And you can see that I've selected a section of the flower that is going to show up really, really nice. So now I have all of my pieces cut and embossed. And on the gold, this just looks absolutely stunning. The Bergenias just pop off the page, and it is a beautiful, beautiful panel. So this is where the perspective comes into play. I could have very easily taken that gold piece and cut it down to the rounded rectangle size and just added it to my card. But I wanted to make that an inset look. So I'm putting on a piece of jet black cardstock for my base. And then I'm going to add in my piece of gold embossed. And this is really going to create a background, and then I'll put the frame over the top of it. When I put the frame over the top, though, I will pop it up with some adhesive foam strips. So let's get that gold piece down. And it's cut small enough that when I put the frame over the top of it, you're not going to see the edges. There we go. And then I can add in my frame. So I've got just some adhesive strips here that I'll put around the edges. And that's going to be just enough to pop that up and let that Bergenia embossed panel sit back into the card and look really, really elegant. So if you didn't notice, the frame panel is cut slightly smaller than the card base, and so that ends up being 4 by 5 1/4, and that gives us a nice little border around the outside as well as that inset space on the inside. So now I can add in my sentiment strip, and I'm just going to add a piece of foam adhesive in the center and then glue on the edges. And that's going to keep everything nice and level across the base there. And this piece is cut to 4 inches, so that way it extends all the way across and it'll reach the edge of the frame. So once I've got that in place, then I just need to decide where my flowers are going to go. And I'm going to kind of group them in a little tight triangle, and I need to actually cut off a little bit of my leaf there so that way it can get tucked back behind the sentiment along with the flower. So once I have those dry fit in place, all I need to do is add them on with a little bit of liquid adhesive. Though I created this card in black and gold, there are so many different approaches you could take to this look. You could do something in silver and a lighter tone. You could go for solid colors all the way through. You could use a glitter paper. A lot of different ways that you could make this card look completely different. All right, for our second card, I'm going to focus on the large Bergenia stamp from the Bergenia Builder stamp set. And we're going to do a little bit of masking so that way we can create a larger arrangement. I'm going to go ahead and place that stamp, and I'm going to actually mask off the leaves at the bottom. I found that this was the best way to create an even larger arrangement, and you'll see that come to life in a minute here. So when I mask, I just take a Post-it, and I was able to segment off the leaves and go ahead and ink that up in Obsidian black, and then remove the mask and stamp. And that means that I'm not going to have the leaf in the final imprint. And that's exactly what I wanted. Now I am going to stamp this twice because my take on the sketch for this card is an opposite take of what we just did. So instead of having an inset, we're going to have a pop up in the center. So I need to have 2 images that are exactly the same, and this is the best way to do it. So I'm creating both of these panels at the same time, and that way I know they're going to fit together exactly when I die cut the top one. So now I'm going to work on the masking and adding in the extra piece. I've pre-cut a Post-it note to mask off the bottom of the stamped image that I already have. And then I'm going to go ahead and repeat that process. So I flip my cardstock over, and when I stamp in my second Bergenia, it's going to overlap slightly, but I have the mask in place, so you're not going to see that. And then you're going to see in the end here that I have a beautiful arrangement. So that is a great way to get the Bergenias all the way across your project. So let's take a look at how that happened again. First, I add on the mask to protect the already stamped image. And then again, I will mask the leaves and ink it up. And once that's inked up, I'll remove that mask and go ahead and stamp again. And then I have a completed image with mirrored Bergenias that look like one large complete arrangement. To finish off the bottom panel, I'm going to add some black spatter. I wasn't sure at first if I was going to do that, but it turns out that it just really does add a little bit of extra interest and makes the panel just not so plain. So a little bit of spatter goes a long way. And I just added on some spatter with the jet black ink spray using a brush because I find that I get a little bit more control with that. So I'll move all of that out of the way, and then we'll go into the fun watercoloring. So the 4 colors I'm using are Gold Pearl, Rhodolite, Jade, and Copper. And I'm going to start with the Jade. I wasn't quite sure about this technique at first because I am watercoloring on plain paper. This is not watercolor paper. But I found that with the metallic watercolors, this technique seemed to work just fine. This is what I would call quick and dirty watercoloring. I'm not going for any kind of shading or any kind of consistency or light source or shadows or anything like that. I'm just trying to get color on the paper. So I start off with the green, and once I get all of my stems colored, I move into the Gold Pearl, and I'm going for all of the leaves in Gold Pearl. Now I find that when I'm working with the metallic watercolors, less is definitely more. So I go for for a lot of water and not a lot of pigment. I want to make sure that those black lines are showing through, but I'm still getting a little bit of shimmer from the color. So once I have the gold finished, I'm going to move into a really risky thing here. I decided that I needed to have a dark background, so I dipped into Rhodolite, my absolute favorite color from this entire palette, and I attempted to create a solid looking background. I wanted to make this dark so it would really contrast with the all white background that it was going to go over, and it paid off in spades. It looks absolutely gorgeous and provides amazing shimmer. So once that was done, I came in and added in some copper for the stamen, and I was finished with that. My next step was to go ahead and cut down that watercolor panel with the rounded rectangle die. I went for the second largest die so that way I could still see a lot of the white behind it. So I go ahead and center that right in place just like I did with the first project, and we'll get that die cut. Now the rest of this panel won't go to waste. I'll definitely be able to use it for another project, which is why I wasn't hesitant to go ahead and watercolor the whole thing at once. All right, now I have everything complete and I can go ahead and start assembling this whole project. I did take care of the sentiment off camera because it's the same sentiment that we used for the first card. So I'll go ahead and put down my background image here. And this is just gorgeous all on its own. It really would be pretty just as a one layer card and maybe a sentiment through the center. But we're definitely going to step this up and follow along with our sketch. So this time, like I said, instead of in the setting that image, we're going to pop it up. So I'm using a piece of foam sheet, and I pop that onto the back of my die cut image. And this is where I need to decide if I'm going to make this a vertical card or a horizontal card. And even though I like the way that the vertical looks, I decided I wanted to stretch this sketch and show you how it could look just as nice in a horizontal setup. So I'll go ahead and add that center panel in. And I just need to match up my lines. And this is where stamping the two images at the same time works out really well. That way I knew I had everything centered perfectly. And when I went to die cut my image, it was going to go right in the middle of my project. So I've got that in place. And then I just need to go ahead and add my sentiment. I could go straight across or I could offset a little bit, and I decided to offset it just to add a little bit of interest and to break some lines across the center of the project. So once everything is aligned, this card is complete and my duo with today's sketch is done for you. So which card did you prefer, the inset gold or the popped up metallic? I'd love to know, so leave it in a comment below. If you've been loving this Sketch Starters series, I'd love to see a thumbs up on this video. And when you use a sketch in your projects, don't forget to use the hashtag Altenew Sketch Starters when you post it to social media. I'll be back soon with more fun with sketches, but until next time, happy crafting. Help support my craft education efforts by clicking on the subscribe button and the little bell so you'll get notified when I create new content just for you. If you're looking for something else to watch, how about one of these crafty videos?